The annual Brookhaven Community Fair was the kind of event that made the little town feel like a living postcard. For one weekend every summer, the park transformed into a buzzing, colorful hub, a patchwork of striped tents, picnic tables, draped in checkered cloths, and banners flapping gently in the August breeze. The scent of sizzling burgers mingled with the sugary sweetness of funnel cakes, drifting lazily over the crowd like an invisible invitation. Children's laughter rippled through the air, carried on the rhythm of carousel music and the occasional squeak of sneakers racing over the playground's rubber mats. Local musicians strummed guitars at the small bandstand, their mellow tunes blending seamlessly with the background hum of chatter and clinking lemonade cups. Emily Parker pushed her sunglasses up the bridge of her nose as she strolled through the fairgrounds with her 3-year-old son, Noah, balanced on her hip. He was a wiry little thing, with tufts of sandy hair sticking out in all directions, the kind of hair that never seemed to stay combed, no matter how much he tried. His blue eyes darted everywhere, at the balloon animals, the cotton candy machine, the row of brightly colored kites fluttering high above the grass. The fair had always been Emily's happy place. She'd come here every year as a child with her parents, holding hands with her father as they navigated the maze of booths. Her father had been the type of man who could strike up a conversation with anyone, and more often than not, he'd end up petting every dog he met along the way. It was different this year. Her father wasn't here, and without him, there was an empty space in the day that no amount of music or laughter could quite fill. Still, she wanted the day to be special for Noah. She'd promised herself that even if she had to fake the smiles at times, he wouldn't feel that absence as sharply as she did. She was determined to give him the same kind of carefree summer memories she'd once had. "Look, Mommy, fire truck." Noah squealed, pointing toward the red engine parked near the far edge of the lawn. "That's right, buddy," she said, shifting him so he could see better. "Want to go check it out after lunch?" He nodded eagerly, then buried his face in her shoulder when a group of teenagers ran past, shrieking with excitement as they chased each other. Emily slowed her steps when she noticed the growing crowd near the north end of the park. A makeshift stage had been set up, cordoned off with bright orange cones. Beside it, a large blue tent bore the words Brookhaven Police Department, Community Safety, and K-9 Unit in bold letters. She'd seen them do demonstrations before, the officers showing off the discipline and skill of their trained dogs. The kids always loved it. The dogs would leap over obstacles, sniff out hidden evidence, and respond instantly to a string of sharp, confident commands. Noah squirmed in her arms, trying to see over the heads of the people in front of them. "You want to watch?" she asked. He gave a small nod, but there was a flicker in his expression she couldn't quite read, not exactly excitement, but interest. They found a spot near the front, just as an officer in a neatly pressed uniform stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a calm presence that seemed to quiet the crowd without him having to say much. "Good afternoon. Brookhaven," he called into the microphone, his voice carrying easily over the chatter. "We're glad to be here again for the annual fair. My name's Officer Daniels, and this here is one of our finest K-9 officers. He's going to show you what it takes to keep our community safe." The crowd broke into applause as a German shepherd stepped onto the grass beside him. The dog's coat was a perfect blend of tan and black, the fur so well groomed it seemed to catch the sunlight in every movement. His ears were pricked forward, eyes scanning the crowd with a calm alertness that spoke of years of disciplined training. "This here is Rex," Danielle said proudly, giving the dog a pat on the side. "He's been with us for almost 2 years, and he's a key part of our team." Emily smiled faintly. She'd always liked German shepherds. Her father had owned one when she was little, a big, lovable dog named Max, who'd seemed almost human in the way he understood things. She hadn't thought about Max in a long time. Beside her, Noah was still staring at the dog, but not with the same casual curiosity as the other kids. His small body had gone completely still, a kind of stillness that meant every ounce of. His attention was locked onto something. Officer Daniels gave the first command, and Rex sprang into action, leaping over a series of low barriers with smooth precision. The children squealed and clapped. Daniels tossed a rubber training sleeve to another officer, and Rex tore across the grass to clamp onto it in a perfect display of controlled force. Emily laughed along with the rest of the crowd, but Noah didn't move. His gaze was fixed, unblinking. She shifted him slightly. "You okay, buddy?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his little hand crept up to grip her sleeve. Then, without taking his eyes off the German shepherd, he whispered something so softly she almost didn't hear it. It was only 2 words, and when she processed them, her breath caught in her throat. Emily's ears almost doubted what they'd just picked up over the noise of the fair. 2 words, soft but steady, words that carried no hesitation. She looked down at her son. "What did you say, Noah?" This time, he spoke them louder, his little voice clear enough for the people nearby to hear. "Max home." The syllables landed strangely in the warm afternoon air, as if they didn't belong to the cheerful atmosphere around them. Emily blinked, momentarily disoriented. Max? She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in months, not since the storm, not since the endless search that had ended with nothing but silence. She forced a small laugh, thinking maybe he'd overheard someone else say it. "Sweetie, that dog's name is Rex," she explained, nodding toward the officer and his partner. Noah didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on the dog. The German shepherd had stopped mid-movement, his head tilted slightly to the side. The sharp, professional focus in his eyes softened just enough to notice. His ears flicked forward. And then, in an unmistakable break from his training, he took a slow step toward the edge of the cones. Officer Daniels frowned. "Rex, heel." The dog hesitated. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd, the kind of light-hearted amusement that comes when a perfectly trained animal decides to be a little stubborn. But there was nothing playful in the shepherd's expression. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She'd seen that look before. Years ago, in her father's backyard, when Max had spotted her coming home from school. That same alert, ears up, still as stone posture that came right before he would bound toward her in greeting. Her fingers tightened around Noah's small frame. The German shepherd stepped forward again, tail lowering in a slow wag. Daniels gave another firm command, voice deeper this time, but the dog's eyes didn't leave Noah's face. Emily felt a shift in the air around them, the crowds, curiosity turning into quiet attention. People near her began to notice the strange, almost magnetic connection forming between the boy and the animal. "Noah," Emily murmured, crouching so her eyes met his. "Why do you think that's Max?" The child's answer came without pause, as if it was the simplest truth in the world. "'Cause it is." There was no dramatic emphasis, no playful imagination in his tone, just certainty. She swallowed hard, her mind flipping through the possibilities. It couldn't be? Max had disappeared nearly a year ago, on that stormy night when thunder had rattled the windows and her father's old dog had bolted through the fence gate. They'd searched for weeks, the whole family, neighbors, even strangers from online. Lost pet groups. No collar, no microchip on record, no sign of him. Eventually, Emily had told herself the kindest story she could, that someone had found him and given him a good home. And now here was this police dog, Officer Daniels, sensing. The murmur in the crowd took a step toward them. "Ma'am, is there something going on here?" Emily hesitated. I I don't know. My son thinks he knows your dog. Daniels glanced down at Rex, who had stopped obeying completely and was now standing just a few feet from the edge. Of the cones, body angled toward Noah, the officer's brows drew together. That's unusual, he admitted. Rex doesn't break focus during a demo. Noah leaned slightly forward, almost sliding out of Emily's arms. Max, he called softly, like coaxing an old friend out from behind the couch. The German. Shepard's ears perked even higher, and for a split second, his composure cracked. His tail wagged again, not in the eager, frenzied way of a puppy, but in a slow, deliberate rhythm. It was the kind of wag you gave someone you remembered. The crowd's laughter had faded completely now. People exchanged glances, unsure if they were witnessing a coincidence or something remarkable. Emily could feel dozens of eyes shifting between her son, the dog, and the officer. Daniel seemed torn between maintaining the demonstration and figuring out what was unfolding in front of him. Finally, he made a decision. He unclipped the leash from his belt loop and held it firmly as he guided Rex closer to where Emily stood. "All right, buddy," Daniel said gently to Noah, kneeling so they were eye level. "You've met Rex before?" Noah shook his head. "Not Rex, Max." Emily's throat tightened. She could practically hear her father's voice in her head, teasing her about overthinking things. But the part of her that knew dogs, especially Max, couldn't ignore the signs. The way the shepherd's body language had shifted. The way Noah hadn't taken his eyes off him since he'd appeared. Daniels watched carefully. "All right, let's see what happens." He gave the leash some slack. The German shepherd stepped forward slowly, almost cautiously, as if testing whether this was really happening. When he reached Noah, he lowered his head and pressed his muzzle gently against the boy's chest. The reaction was immediate. Noah giggled, not the nervous giggle of meeting a strange dog, but the pure, unfiltered sound of reunion. His small hands found the thick fur around the shepherd's neck, and instead of resisting, the dog leaned into the touch. Emily's vision blurred for a moment. She blinked it away, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "That's not how Rex greets people." Emily forced her voice steady. "That's how Max used to greet my dad." For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft hum of the fair in the background, the music, the distant shouts of kids on the rides, the faint pop of popcorn kernels in an old metal machine. But right here, in this little circle of stillness, something unexplainable was happening. Noah pulled back just enough to look into the dog's face. "Hi, Max," he whispered. "You came home." Emily's heart clenched. She didn't know if she believed in miracles. But this felt close. Daniel straightened, clearly unsettled, but also curious. "Ma'am, we should talk after this demo," he said quietly. Emily nodded, not taking her eyes off the German shepherd, or Max, as every part of her wanted to call him. Around them, the crowd seemed to understand they were seeing something rare. Phones came out, capturing the boy and the dog in a moment that felt suspended in time, unshaken by the noise of the fair. Emily didn't know where this was leading. But deep down, a flicker of hope, the same hope she'd buried almost a year ago, began to rise again. Noah's voice was small, but it cut cleanly through the noise of the fair. "Max home." The words landed with a weight no one in the circle could ignore. It was strange. No fireworks, no gasp from the crowd, just a sudden quiet. Conversations nearby seemed to fade, as if the fair itself were leaning in to listen. Emily's pulse drummed in her ears. She glanced at Officer Daniels, who was watching his dog with a frown that wasn't anger, but something closer to disbelief. Rex or Max was still pressed gently against Noah, tail wagging in that slow, deliberate rhythm. The movement was steady, almost hypnotic, as though the dog was savoring a memory. "This is Different, Daniels murmured, have to. Himself, what do you mean? Emily asked, her voice low but tight with curiosity. Rex doesn't greet anyone like that. Ever. He's trained to stay neutral with the public. No cuddling, no leaning in. And he never ignores a command. Emily didn't answer right away. She was too busy watching the dog's eyes. They weren't darting around like a working canine's would, scanning for threats or distractions. They were locked on her son. Not on the funnel cake in his hand, not on the squealing kids behind him. Just Noah, as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Noah grinned up at the shepherd. Told you, he said softly. The dog made a low, rumbling sound deep in his chest. Not a growl, but a kind of throaty hum. Emily had heard that sound before, years ago, when Max had curled up beside her, father's recliner, and drifted into contentment. Daniels crouched down beside the pair, his brows knitting together. Buddy, where'd you meet Rex before? Noah shook his head. Didn't meet Rex. Met Max. Emily's throat tightened again. She was caught between wanting to explain everything and fearing how impossible it would sound. Officer, my dad had a dog, a German shepherd named Max. He went missing last year. We never found him. Daniels nodded slowly, glancing at the dog. And you think? I don't know what I think, she admitted. But this is exactly how Max acted with us. It's uncanny. From the corner of her eye, she saw a few people in the crowd exchange looks, whispering. Someone was already holding their phone up, recording. Daniels stood and looked at the shepherd. Rex, he said in a sharper tone. Come. The dog didn't move. That in itself was extraordinary. A police K-9 ignoring a direct recall command was more than unusual. It was unheard of. Daniels stepped forward, gently taking the leash to guide the shepherd away. But as soon as the dog felt the pull, he turned his head toward Noah and let out a quiet whine. It was the soft, mournful sound of recognition. Emily felt something in her chest give way. All those nights after the storm, the rain still dripping from the roof, the fence swinging open, she had imagined Max somewhere out there, confused but alive. She had pictured him finding shelter in someone's yard, maybe being taken in by a kind stranger. But to imagine him here, now, standing before them with a new name and a new life, that was something she hadn't dared hope for. Daniels looked uneasy now. Ma'am, after this demonstration, can you stick around? I want to check something. Emily nodded quickly. Yes, of course. Noah, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension between the adults, was still patting the shepherd's neck. You came back, Max, he whispered. The dog pressed closer, and for a moment, Emily could have sworn she saw the years fall away. The dog wasn't a polished, uniformed canine anymore, but the same animal who chased tennis balls in her father's yard, who'd rested his head on her knee while she studied for college exams. Daniels cleared his throat and turned back to the microphone. All right, folks, let's give Rex a quick break before our next demo. It was a graceful way to end things without acknowledging how completely the schedule had been derailed. He led the dog, reluctantly it seemed, a few steps back, toward the tent. Noah's eyes followed every movement, his smile fading into something more solemn. Emily bent down to his level. Hey, buddy, we'll see him again in a minute. Okay? Noah nodded, but his little hands gripped the hem of her shirt. Don't let him go. Her heart twisted. We won't, she promised, though she wasn't sure she had the power to keep it. As Daniels disappeared toward the tent, a few people from the crowd came up to Emily. That was wild, one man said. Your kid must really know that dog. I've never seen a police dog do that, another added. They're like soldiers. They don't just break rank like that. Emily smiled politely, but kept her answers vague. The truth was too strange to casually explain to strangers in the middle of a fair. When the crowd began to disperse toward the food stalls and rides, Emily took Noah's hand and led him closer to the tent. Daniels was crouched beside the dog, talking to another officer. His expression was serious, but every few seconds, the shepherd would glance toward the entrance toward them. Emily knew that look. It was the same way Max had watched her dad leave for work every morning, waiting for the moment the door would open again. Daniels noticed her and gestured her inside. "We'll run a quick scan," he said, "just to rule out any chance. This is, well, you know." Emily's pulse quickened. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I know." But deep down, something in her didn't need proof. She already knew. A ripple had spread through the crowd like the soft roll of wind across a wheat field, subtle at first, but undeniable once you felt it. At the edges, parents were whispering, kids were asking questions, and strangers were leaning on tiptoe to catch a better look. It wasn't just that the boy had called out to the police dog. It was the way the dog had responded. Emily could feel it, that collective shift from casual curiosity to quiet awe. People didn't always know the details of a moment, but they could sense when something extraordinary was happening right in front of them. Inside the K9 tent, the atmosphere was different. The fluorescent lights cast a cooler tone, muting the bright colors of the fair outside. The air smelled faintly of leather leashes, clean fur, and the slightly metallic tang of the water bowls. Set out for the dogs. Officer Daniels stood near a collapsible table where a portable scanner rested. Another officer, a younger man with close-cropped hair, was watching the exchange closely, clearly intrigued. The German shepherd, Rex to some, Max to others, was pacing in small arcs, glancing between Noah and Daniels with visible uncertainty. Noah didn't hesitate. As soon as they entered, he let go of Emily's hand and knelt on the floor, patting his knees gently. "Come here, Max." The shepherd stopped mid-step. His ears tipped forward, and his paws made no sound on the mat as he crossed the space between them. He settled beside Noah, pressing his body against the boy's side, like a shadow that had found its source. Emily swallowed hard. She'd told herself she needed the scan, something tangible, a piece of proof to cling to, but deep down, she was already convinced. "All right," Daniel said, breaking the quiet. "Let's just do this by the book." He crouched beside the dog, slipping a hand beneath the thick fur at the base of his neck. The scanner was about the size of a TV remote, its small screen already glowing green. Daniels ran it slowly over the dog's shoulder blades, waiting for the telltale beep. The sound came, sharp and quick. A number flashed across the screen. Daniels frowned. "Huh," the younger officer leaned in. "What's it say?" "This isn't the standard PD registration code," Daniels said, glancing at Emily. "It's older. Must have been in there before we adopted him." Emily's heart picked up. She tried to keep her voice even. "So it's—" Daniels pressed a button on the scanner. A name appeared, pixelated but unmistakable. Max, owner, Charles. Parker, the air seemed to thicken. Emily's breath caught. Her father's name, right there on the screen, as plain as the summer sun outside. Daniels exhaled slowly, then turned the scanner so she could see it. "Looks like your son was right." Noah looked up at her with a wide, proud grin. "Told you, Mommy." Emily knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his small shoulders. Her eyes burned, but she forced herself not to cry. Not yet. She wanted to keep her voice steady for Noah. "Yeah, buddy? You did." The younger officer gave a low whistle. "So, this dog's been working with us all this time, and he's hers?" Daniels nodded. "Found as a stray. No collar, no tags. We took him in, retrained him, renamed him Rex." He paused, looking at the shepherd, who now had his head resting in Noah's lap. Guess he never forgot. Outside the tent, a few people had gathered near the opening, peeking in. News of the strange reunion was spreading fast, carried by those who'd witnessed it firsthand. You could see it on their faces, that spark of wanting to tell someone else before the day was over. One of the onlookers, an older woman in a sun hat, whispered to her friend, "That's not just a dog remembering, that's love." Emily heard it, and for once, she didn't mind being overheard. Daniels cleared his throat. "Listen, Max Rex, he's been with the department for almost 2 years. He's one of our best. We can't just..." He trailed off, as if already anticipating the conversation that would follow. Emily understood. This wasn't as simple as finding a lost dog at a shelter and signing the adoption papers. This was a working dog, bonded to a team, trained for service. She could already hear the echo of her father's voice in her head. "Take care of him if you can." Noah looked between the adults, sensing the shift in tone, even if he didn't understand the details. His lower lip wobbled. "He's ours, right?" Emily pulled him close. "We'll see, sweetheart." The dog seemed to sense Noah's unease. He nudged the boy's arm with his nose, then sat straighter, his body angled protectively toward him. Daniels watched the gesture with a strange mix of admiration and resignation. "Ma'am," he said finally, "let's step outside. I need to speak with the chief." They walked back into the sunlight, the shepherd trotting at Noah's side, leash slack in Daniel's hand. The crowd outside had thinned slightly as the fair's attractions called people elsewhere, but a small knot of curious faces still lingered, watching them pass. Whispers followed in their wake. "That's the little boy who knew the dog's name. They said it's his grandpa's dog. No way. That's a miracle." Emily didn't care about the whispers. All she could focus on was the solid presence of the dog beside her, the familiar pattern of his fur under her fingertips, the deep, steady breath she could hear every time she leaned closer. Daniels led them toward a quieter corner of the fairgrounds, away from the noise and the food stalls. "Stay here," he said, handing the leash to Emily. "I'll be back." She nodded, feeling the weight of the leather strap in her palm. It was the first time she'd held Max's leash since before the storm. As Daniels walked away, Noah leaned against Max, who lowered himself onto the grass without hesitation. The boy's fingers played idly with the dog's ear. Emily sat beside them, watching the two of them together, and for the first time in nearly a year, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to bring Max home again. And just like that, the hope she had buried deep in the quietest part of her heart began to stir. Officer Daniels returned about 10 minutes later with a man Emily guessed was the police chief. He was older, with the kind of posture that said he'd spent his life in uniform. His dark sunglasses reflected the fairground behind her, but when he spoke, his tone was straightforward. "Daniels tells me you believe this dog is yours," the chief said. Emily nodded, one hand resting on Max's broad back. "My father's technically. His name was Charles Parker. This is Max. He's been missing since last summer." The chief's expression didn't change, but he glanced at Daniels. "Let's hear it." Emily took a breath and started. It was August. Hot, sticky. One of those weeks when the air feels like it's pressing down on you. We'd been at my dad's house earlier that day. Me, my son Noah, and Max. My dad had had Max for years. He wasn't just a pet, he was family. Her eyes drifted to the dog, who was lying at Noah's feet, his head resting on the boy's sandal. That night, a storm rolled in. A bad one. The wind came first, rattling the old fence out back. Then the thunder. Max never liked storms, but he'd always been okay if someone was home with him. My dad tried to calm him, but at some point, lightning must have spooked him. The gate blew open, and Max ran. She could still see the rain streaming down the kitchen window that night, the fence swinging like a broken arm. Her father's frantic voice on the phone. "He's gone, Em. I've checked the yard." "He's gone. We searched for days," she continued. "Me, my dad, neighbors. We put up flyers, called shelters, posted online. Nothing. Not a single sighting." Her voice wavered just enough to betray the weight of those weeks. After a month, I told myself someone had found him. Someone kind. It was the only way I could live with not knowing. The chief glanced down at the dog, then back at her. "And your father?" Emily's throat tightened. "He passed away 2 months later. Heart failure. He never stopped." Hoping Max would come home. Noah, who had been quiet until now, looked up. Grandpa said Max was brave. And that brave dogs always find their way back. The chief's jaw shifted, but his voice stayed even. "Ma'am, after your dog was found, he was brought to animal control in Greenfield County. No tags, no ID, no microchip info on file. They held him for the standard period, but no one claimed him. The department adopted him as a K-9 prospect. We called him Rex." Emily nodded slowly. "I understand how that happens. I just didn't expect him to end up here." The chief studied her for a long moment. "Max Rex has been one of our most reliable dogs. He served in narcotics detection, search and rescue drills, and school safety demos. But I'll admit, he looked at the dog again, watching. The way Max kept his eyes on Noah. I've never seen him react to anyone the way I saw today." Daniels stepped in. When Noah called his name, he ignored every command. "He never ignores me, Chief." The chief exhaled slowly. "If this is truly your dog, then you've both been through a lot. But this isn't a decision we make on the spot. There's protocol, retirement, handler reassignment, paperwork." Emily's stomach twisted. She'd known it wouldn't be simple. Still, she couldn't help hoping. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "When my dad got Max, he was newly retired from the fire department. He said he didn't know what to do with himself without a shift to get up for. Max became his shift. Morning walks, afternoon fetch, evening guard duty by the porch. That dog gave him purpose after 30 years of running into burning buildings." She glanced at Max, whose tail thumped softly against the grass. "When my dad died, I felt like I'd lost them both. Seeing Max here today." Her voice caught, but she pushed through. "It feels like my dad sent him back." The chief didn't respond immediately. The only sounds were the distant hum of the fair rides and the occasional burst of laughter from the crowd. Finally, he said, "You said you tried to chip him?" Emily nodded. "The vet's machine was broken the day we went in. We scheduled another appointment, but it was after the storm. We never got the chance." The chief gave a faint nod. "That explains the old chip info still being in there. Most agencies update the record when they adopt a dog. Guess the county shelter didn't wipe it before they transferred him to us." Daniels added, "That also explains why none of us knew his history." Emily felt a mix of frustration and relief. Frustration at how close they'd been all along. Relief that the missing piece had finally fallen into place. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, can Max come home now?" Emily smoothed his hair. "We'll see, sweetheart." The chief crouched down slightly to look at Noah. "You really think this is Max, huh?" Noah nodded solemnly. "Max knows me. And I know him." The chief studied the boy for a second longer, then straightened. "All right. I'll talk to the department. But I'll be honest, it's not an easy call. He's a valuable working dog. Still, I can't ignore what I've seen today." Emily's chest loosened just a fraction. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. As the chief and Daniel stepped aside to speak privately, Emily stayed on the grass with Max and Noah. The boy was tracing lazy patterns in the fur on Max's back, and the dog was watching him with a kind of calm, patient attention that only comes from years of trust. It didn't matter how many names he'd been given, how many uniforms he'd worn. To her, and to Noah, he was still Max. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally finding his way home. Officer Daniels had handled dozens of public events with Rex. He'd seen the dog track a scent through dense woodland in under 20 minutes. He'd watched him stay locked in place during high-pressure training scenarios when fireworks popped, and strangers shouted inches from his ears. He'd seen discipline etched into every move the shepherd made. And yet, here they were. Max Rex was lying on the grass with a 3-year-old boy's hand resting on his back, as if that was the most natural position in the world. No tension in his muscles, no half-glance to Daniels for instruction, no sense that he was on duty at all. It didn't fit with the dog Daniels knew, and it didn't feel like coincidence. The chief finished speaking to Emily and stepped aside, giving Daniels a subtle nod. "Go ahead," he said under his breath. "Check him again. I want a full scan and the transfer history from the chip." Daniels crouched down beside the dog. "All right, buddy, let's see what's hiding in that record of yours." His voice was gentle, but his hands were methodical as he pulled the scanner from its holster. Emily shifted so Noah could still reach Max, but gave Daniels space to work. Her gaze stayed fixed on the shepherd, reading every flick of his ears and tilt of his head like a familiar book she thought was lost forever. The scanner's green light swept over the base of the dog's neck. Beep. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The same code flashed on the screen, along with the original registration. Max, owner, Charles Parker. He pressed another button to pull. The full history. The display shifted, showing the dates. The original chip had been implanted nearly 7 years ago. The shelter had updated the database 23 days after Max was picked up in Greenfield County. The PD had registered him under Rex less than a week after that. Daniels exhaled, shaking his head. Well, there's no doubt now. He looked up at the chief. He's hers. The chip doesn't lie. The chief's mouth tightened in a thoughtful line. And yet, for almost 2 years, he's been ours. It wasn't an accusation, but Daniels felt the weight of it all the same. I know. Max turned his head at the sound of their voices, then leaned into Noah's touch again. The boy had started humming softly, tuneless, but content, and the shepherd's eyes had half closed. "Chief," Daniels said quietly, "I've worked with Rex long enough to know he's a great police dog. But whatever this is," he gestured toward the boy and the dog, "you can't train it. You can't fake it either." The chief's gaze stayed fixed on Max. "You saying you think he should go back?" Daniels hesitated. In the world of canine work, dogs were partners, not property. Letting one go wasn't like handing back borrowed equipment. It meant giving up a member of the team. But this wasn't just any bond. "I'm saying," Daniels replied, "that I've seen him at his best in the field. And I've never seen him like this. He's not just remembering them, he's choosing them." Emily's fingers tightened slightly in the leash. "We're not trying to take him away from something he loves. I can see how much he respects you. But my dad raised him from a pup. He's family." Daniels looked at her, then at Noah, then at the shepherd, who was supposed to be his partner. He remembered the first time he'd met Rex, a newly trained recruit with perfect obedience, the kind of dog you could trust with your life. He'd respected the animal immediately. But in all their time together, Daniels had never seen him soften like this. The chief spoke again, his voice measured. If Max were near retirement, this would be simple. But he's in his prime. We don't just retire a dog early without cause. That said, he paused as though weighing something in his mind. It's also clear to me that cause might be standing right in front of us. Daniels thought about all the calls they'd answered, the training hours logged, the trust built between handler and dog. Losing Max would leave a hole in the unit. But keeping him, knowing his real family was right here, felt wrong in a way he couldn't quite justify. "Let me put it like this," Daniels said finally. "If this were me in their shoes, I'd want him back. And if I were Max, I think I'd want to go." The chief didn't respond immediately. His sunglasses made it impossible to read his eyes, but Daniels could see the lines in his face deepen. After a long moment, he nodded. "We'll review it. For now, keep them together for the rest of the day. Let's see how he does." Emily's relief was visible, but she kept it contained, maybe afraid to let herself hope too much. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniels clipped the leash back into Emily's hand. "You hold on to him," he said. "I think he's already made his choice." Noah's face lit up. He wrapped his small arms around Max's neck in a hug that was more trust than restraint. The shepherd stayed perfectly still, then gave a slow wag of his tail. As they walked together through the fairgrounds, the boy, the mother, the officer, and the dog, Daniels realized something surprising. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about Rex as his partner in a professional sense. He was thinking about Max, the dog who'd once belonged to a retired firefighter named Charles Parker, and who might be about to start a whole new chapter. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, Daniels knew, sometimes doing the right thing meant letting go. By the time the sun began to tilt low in the sky, the fair had settled into that golden hour glow. The Ferris wheel spun slowly against a backdrop of orange and pink. The smell of kettle corn and grilled burgers drifted through the air. Max trotted beside Emily and Noah, as though he had been with them all along. His gait was loose, his ears relaxed, his eyes scanning not in the sharp, patrol-ready way Daniels was used to, but in the casual way a dog checks for familiar smells. Friendly faces. Daniels kept a few steps behind, watching. Every so often, he'd catch Emily glancing down at Max, with the kind of quiet awe reserved for miracles that come wrapped in ordinary moments. Noah had been chattering the whole time about the rides, the music, and how Max had probably missed hot dogs while he was gone. At the edge of the fairground, the chief was speaking with two other officers. He motioned Daniels over with a quick wave. "How's he doing?" the chief asked. Daniels glanced over his shoulder, like he never left them. "I've never seen him this easy. Even when he's off duty, he usually has that edge. Not today." One of the officers, a younger guy named Torres, frowned. "You mean to tell me we're thinking about letting him go? He's the best K9 we've got." The chief didn't answer Torres directly. Instead, he said, "Sometimes the best isn't just about skill. It's about where they belong." Daniels didn't miss the weight behind those words. The chief wasn't a sentimental man. If he was talking like that, it meant something had shifted. Still, there were procedures. A K9 wasn't just a dog. He was city property, part of the department's budget and operational capability. Giving him up could set a precedent. "Chief," Daniels said carefully, "if we do this, we'll have to make it official. Sign him out of service. Close the case in the records." The chief nodded. "Already spoke to the city attorney. Technically, since the original owner never surrendered rights, the adoption by animal control might not hold up if challenged. We can call it a voluntary release for compassionate reasons." Daniels blinked. "You're saying you've already decided?" The chief finally looked straight at him. "I've been watching that dog all day. The second the kid called his name, he stopped being a K9 and started being Max again. That tells me he's not ours anymore, and maybe he never really was. For a moment, Daniels didn't speak. Then he felt something unexpected, relief. He dreaded the idea of losing his partner in the field, but deep down, he knew the chief was right. "All right," Daniels said quietly. "Let's tell them." They crossed back toward Emily and Noah, who were sitting on the grass with Max between them. The shepherd was sprawled out, head resting on Noah's tiny leg, eyes half closed. The boy was telling him a story about how Grandpa used to sneak him cheese, while Emily listened with a smile that was both happy and fragile. The chief stopped a few feet away. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "I've made a decision." Emily's smile faltered. She straightened, bracing herself. The chief continued, "Effective immediately, Max is retired from the department. We'll handle the paperwork on our end. He's free to go home with you." For a second, Emily didn't seem to understand. Then the words landed, and her breath caught. "You mean, he's yours?" the chief said simply. Noah squealed. Before she could answer, "Max, you're coming home." The boy threw his arms around the dog, who let out a low, pleased rumble that might have been the canine version of a laugh. Emily's eyes filled, and she blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what to say." The chief gave a rare, small smile. "You already said it. You said he's family. That's enough." Daniels crouched down, running a hand along Max's back one last time in the way handlers do. A gesture equal parts affection and assessment. "You've been a good partner, buddy. Time for a new beat." Max glanced at him briefly, then turned his head back toward Noah. Daniels chuckled. "Yeah, I get it. I'd pick him too." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of farewells. Several officers stopped by to scratch Max behind the ears, some shaking their heads at how quickly the change had happened. Torres even muttered, "Guess the kid wins," though he did it with a half-smile. By the time they reached Emily's car, the fair was winding down. The neon lights flickered in the distance, music fading into the summer night. Emily opened the back door, and Max jumped in without hesitation. He turned once in the seat, then settled in beside Noah, who was already buckling his seatbelt with one hand and holding Max's paw with the other. Daniel stood by the car for a moment. "He's going to be spoiled, you know." Emily grinned. "Good, he's earned it." As she closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, the chief stepped forward. "Mrs. Parker," he said quietly, "for what it's worth, your father would be proud. And not just of Max." Emily swallowed hard, managing a small nod. "Thank you." When they pulled away, Max's head was out the window, ears flapping in the wind. Daniels watched until the taillights disappeared, a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction settling in his chest. It wasn't every day you lost a partner, but it also wasn't every day you got to give one back to the life he was meant to have. The drive home was quiet, but full of meaning. Max sat beside Noah, his large head resting on the boy's lap, eyes half closed, but alert enough to soak in the familiar scents rushing past the window. Noah's fingers gently stroked the dog's fur, tracing the outline of his ears as if making sure Max was really there. Emily glanced in the rearview mirror, catching the soft smiles on both their faces. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, Max had been a working police dog, separated from them by months and circumstance. Now he was theirs again. As they pulled into the driveway of her father's old house, Emily's heart clenched. The porch light was still on, though the house had sat empty for months since her father passed. The garden was overgrown, and the wooden steps creaked faintly underfoot. But to Emily, the place felt alive again. Noah jumped out first, tugging Max's leash with excitement. The dog hesitated for a moment, sniffing the air as if recognizing every familiar corner. Then, with a wag of his tail that seemed to say, "I'm home," Max stepped up the porch and onto the welcome mat. Emily followed slowly, carrying a small bag with Max's belongings, his old collar, a worn ball, and a blanket embroidered with her father's initials. The memories flooded her all at once. Afternoons spent playing fetch, the long walks around the neighborhood, and quiet evenings when her father would sit on the porch with Max at his feet. Noah knelt beside the dog and hugged him tight. "Grandpa told me you're the bravest dog in the whole world," he whispered, his voice full of awe. Max responded with a gentle lick on Noah's cheek, a simple gesture of trust and love. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek as she looked around the house. It was time to bring it back to life. The first step was to make sure Max felt safe and loved, just like her father always wanted. The next morning, Emily called the vet to schedule Max's checkup. She wanted to make sure he was healthy and well cared for after all the time apart. The vet was kind and understanding, impressed by Max's calm demeanor despite his police dog training. "Max is lucky to have you," the vet said as she clipped a small ID tag onto his collar. "And it's clear he's happy to be home." That afternoon, Emily and Noah sat on the porch while Max dozed nearby. The gentle hum of life returning to the house surrounded them, birds chirping, the breeze rustling through the trees, and distant sounds of children playing. Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Officer Daniels. "If you ever need anything or just want to say hi, don't hesitate. Max's story is one I won't forget." She smiled and typed back, "Thank you. Neither will we." Days turned into weeks, and life settled into a new rhythm. Max adapted beautifully, shifting from a police dog's strict routine to the leisurely pace of family life. He loved playing with Noah in the yard, guarding the house in his quiet way, and curling up by the fireplace on chilly nights. One afternoon, as Emily was cleaning out a dusty box in the attic, she found a letter tucked inside. It was from her father, dated just before Max had gone missing. His handwriting was shaky, but determined. "To whoever finds Max, know that this dog has been my greatest companion. He's more than a partner. He's family. If fate brings him back, take care of him. He deserves love, loyalty, and a place to call home." Emily's hands trembled as she held the letter close. It was a final message from her father, a blessing that had come full circle. That evening, Emily sat on the porch with Noah and Max. The sky was a tapestry of stars, the same stars her father had watched countless nights before. Max rested his head on her lap, and Noah's laughter echoed as he chased fireflies nearby. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. Max was home, and with him, a piece of her father's spirit had returned too. And as Max's soft breathing sensed with the night, Emily whispered a quiet thanks to the universe for second chances, for unexpected reunions, and for the simple magic of two words, Max and home.